You're listening to Contesting Wrestling, Minisode 29. Eight. The 9 of before 9.
We should really check beforehand.
I will
sometime.
never check.
I have it written down in my notes which one it is.
I will never come to the minisodes prepared. No, actually, that's not true. That's true least of all this time, listeners. We are reflecting on our episodes about WrestleMania 36 and then our premium episode about...
It was episode 27.
It's a lot of numbers. Keep up, listeners.
I was told there would be no math.
It's like Sudoku. A lot of numbers, but there's no math. And then if you are a new listener, these minisodes are brief reflections on corrections and omissions from our episodes during the week, and also discussions of things happening in wrestling or the world at large over the course of the last week.
So this time we have a specific match that we watched just for the minisode at Evan's request, because several times I had mentioned how much I disliked this match, in contrast especially to the Boneyard match and the Firefly Funhouse match and other cinematic wrestling matches. And this was the match between Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa, the so-called Rebel Heart versus the Black Heart, one final beat. That was on the April 8th episode of...
That's what they called this?
NXT television.
Yeah, the final beat.
Yes. So this was supposed to be the very end of the years-long feud between Ciampa and Gargano, which we've covered in a previous premium episode. This is finally the big payoff for the whole feud, and instead of waiting until, normalcy resumes and they can have a crowd again, they were like, no, let's get it done now. So the idea was to do this cinematic style match, not just the straight up wrestling in front of no crowd in the normal Performance Center arena. And when they announced it, it sounded like it might be a kind of cool thing. Triple H was like, all right, guys, since you really want to end this, we're going to rent you a building, an empty building somewhere, and we're going to give you the address, and we're going to send a ref there just to count 1, 2, 3, and we're going to send a camera, and that's going to be it. And so I was expecting this very DIY looking thing, which would be appropriate given that was the name of Gargano and Ciampa's tag team, in a rundown looking warehouse. But no, what do we get? We get something that's obviously in a studio with Triple H there at the beginning, even though he said he wasn't going to be there.
Triple H has to stick his ass directly into it.
And we got a match that was just the most profoundly boring thing I have ever seen in wrestling. And goddamn, I've seen some boring wrestling before. The original broadcast with commercials went a whole hour of this fucking match, in which I think there were 3 minutes that I found slightly compelling.
I cannot imagine watching this for an hour. I started watching it, quickly realized... All right, because here's the thing. You had described it as... and I think in passing, you weren't making a big point, but you described it in passing as, if what happens when you just shoot a wrestling match like a movie, or what happens when you shoot a wrestling match cinematically.
That was a lot of it. Yeah.
And I think that what I pictured when you said those words was not accurate, because in my head, I don't know what I was actually expecting going into this, but I think that I had this idea of a really well shot, a professional, a real cinematographer, shooting this in long sweeping black and white shot. You know what I mean? I don't know. I didn't fucking picture this.
Something like an artfully done kind of.
Yeah. And not
that might
this,
be cool.
which within, that's the thing. I still want somebody to try to do that, because maybe it will work and maybe it'll be stupid, but somebody needs to give it a shot. this was bad. And
You're
within
going to need better performers for it, though.
oh yeah,
Because these two guys just, I don't know.
No,
like
I know.
In the context of pro wrestling, it's fine.
Well-
they do a really good job, as we saw.
Well,
You
these
know?
guys, like especially Gargano, they're like, it's such a modern breed of pro wrestler where he's really good at playing a pro wrestler, as opposed to playing a tough guy or a sports guy or a winner or a competitor. He plays a pro wrestler. When we saw the empty arena match with Terry Funk, he came off as a madman. Johnny Gargano came off as, I'm trying to play a madman, which he's not. The first thing that, okay, so here's what happens. Triple H cuts a promo about how this is it. Brings in, Drake is in charge. Drake Wirtz, noted former deathmatch wrestler turned NXT referee, comes in. And then these two guys run at each other. They throw working punches that don't look like they could break the surface of water at each other that neither of them sell. And I know it's kind of an old-fashioned complaint, but if you've just punched me in the face 6 times and I'm not moving, your punches suck. And if I'm doing the same thing to you, my punches suck. And you're trying to convince me that this is going to be violent? And that immediately killed the atmosphere for me.
And especially this is a movie,
Yeah.
right? Like your facial expressions, your reactions are what we're looking
Right.
at. You know?
But no, and instead of
And
that,
they-
it's them just continuing to like mutter the same 3 or 4 lines at each other like they would be doing if there was a large crowd screaming and they were trying to get you to hear 1 or 2 words over the din of it, but it just didn't work in all this. And they're insulting each other. It's like, I don't care.
We talked about this with like the regular matches in front of no audience. Like just, hearing them insult each other and also like all the grunts and groans, but without the backdrop of the crowd noise is just kind of off-putting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not interesting at all.
It's akin to like hearing people work out, where it's just sort of
Yeah.
it feels a little like personal,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just within 90 seconds, I was like, oh no, I've made a mistake. This sucks.
Doc,
I watched
Doc,
a total
do you know
of like
what?
6 minutes of it.
Oh,
Yeah.
you only watched 6 minutes?
I fast forwarded through. I would like fast forward through a bunch, then I would be like, really? Like they're doing this now?
Yeah.
And then fast forward through a bunch and be like, that's all that has progressed. Like it was. I
Right.
couldn't believe how long it was.
Well, that's one of the biggest problems. It moved so slowly.
The one part I actually liked was when they're on top of the truck, the like 18-wheeler out back, because that looked dangerous,
It did
right?
look
Like,
dangerous, yes.
I would be scared shitless fighting someone on top of a truck like that that I could fall off of. Doc, do you know what TJGW means?
No, I was
that
wondering
was on
that.
Gargano's
I was
t-shirt.
wondering that the whole time myself. I did not see the previous episode of NXT. Perhaps he explained it. TW.
Maybe I looked it up. I couldn't figure it out. Hey, listeners, what the fuck does TJGW mean?
Yeah, please tell us, because they didn't explain it to us. Because they also opted not to do commentary over the match. And again, wrestlers like Gargano and Ciampa are trained and have had all of their wrestling done aimed at a video release with commentators. So when you take that away, it just emphasizes the grunts and stupidity of the rest of it.
Like, I really liked Randy Orton and Edge, who also went 40 minutes with no crowd, but they did have commentary.
Yeah, it was WrestleMania. They were talking.
It was WrestleMania. And they battled in all these different locations in the Performance Center. They did some interesting stuff. They're compelling
Right.
characters in and of themselves. So, yeah, this was sort of the really bad version of that.
It
to
wasn't
me.
like the sixth
worst-
main event match they've had over the last 2 years.
Right. Oh, God. Yeah. And that's the thing is they did pretty much the same shit they do in all their other matches. But the worst thing of all to me, and this goes back to the point that Jim Cornette made about the cinematic matches, was, and the point he said, a lot of people compare wrestlers to stuntmen, but wrestlers are, in a sense, better than stuntmen because they do it in front of a live audience in one take. But there's a move in this fucking match where Ciampa does, like, some people call it the air raid crash or the Schwein or whatever it is. He does this move to Gargano off the top rope to the outside on the floor. But they shoot it in 3 different cuts, 3 different shots. You see them on the top, you see them falling down, and then you see them land on the floor. So it makes me disbelieve that they actually did that spot. I don't think they did. It's an incredibly dangerous and like devastating spot. And I don't believe that they did it. I think they used the fucking magic of cinematography to make it look like they did. And fuck, that's not pro wrestling.
It's a shame they couldn't use the magic of cinematography to make it interesting to watch.
They could have used the magic of editing to cut half of it out, and then it might have been better.
Yes.
Once again,
But again, it
falls under the category of, like, I feel like it's, once again, they're in New York, or at least they're in. Oh wait, no, they're in Florida.
They're in Florida.
Is in Florida.
But
I
they
mean, I
have
guess
a
there are
gigantic studio there.
I just feel like they're not hiring people who know what they're doing. Like, there's a lot of fucking people out there who like know how to shoot things and know how to, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I guess obviously my perception of that is skewed living in New York, but
Right. Yeah, they have people that are used to shooting a live audience-based entertainment product. And they haven't been able to hire a whole new team over the last month because of the pandemic.
True.
The other thing is,
Fired a bunch
and
of
this
people.
this speaks to something that we talked about really at the beginning of doing this podcast, when Evan was complaining about why wrestling matches have to be so long, or why there has to be a bunch of filler on the card. Like, I think we were talking about that in the context of the Bret Hart and his brothers against Shawn Michaels and the Knights or something like that. And in this case, I think, they're like, oh, it's this huge main event match. It's the end of the feud. Let's give it an hour.
Yeah.
And they might have decided that before they ever shot it. And so they couldn't cut it down because they needed to fill an hour of TV time
That
they had set aside for this.
That is one of the pitfalls of television production. One of the biggest business reason why the WWE has not shut down is because they are committed to delivering a certain amount of live programming to Fox over the course of the year. And if they do not deliver that much programming for live primetime time slots, their contract is invalidated, and that's their single biggest source of revenue, and all of a sudden Fox won't give them literally hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's just the business end of all that. Now, more to your point, Ben, I like the time years ago when they were doing the big interaction with Daniel Bryan and Kane. And this was like on Monday Night Raw. Now, Monday Night Raw is a live show, and anyone who's done live television knows, like, once you're in front of the camera, you got to fill the time you got because it's live. There's nothing else. And they had the two of them. They had the fans vote on what was going to happen. And it was like, I can't remember the exact choices, but it was 2 different, like, violent kinds of wrestling matches. And the third choice was, instead of wrestling, they'll hug it out.
Yeah, right.
And the fans, the WWE thought the fans would go the violent route. And they blocked off, like, 10 minutes or 8 minutes for a segment immediately following the vote for a match. And the fans voted for hug it out. So... And this is
the correct choice.
Yeah. So
it very much was.
So they announced the decision. They turned to Kane and Daniel Bryan, who was ready to go to the ring, and they were like, all right, you guys have to go to the ring and hug. You have 8 minutes to fill. Go. And they filled all 8 minutes. They couldn't not. They couldn't just come to the ring, hug each other, and leave. They drew it out. And they ended up being a tag team for most of the next year and a half. It was great.
It was an
Did
awesome
they hug
segment.
for 8 minutes?
Well, no, they're such incredible performers. They stall.
Yeah.
The whole thing is like, oh, I don't really want to hug you. I don't want to do this. And they're compelling enough performers that they made that interesting for 8 minutes. Before the big,
the hug.
Like the payoff of it was they finally hugged at the very end.
Physically speaking, they started at opposite corners and they slowly moved at each other until in the middle of the ring they finally hugged. And that could be a really boring segment, but the two of them were so good they had the crowd really wanting them to do it. And so that when they finally did it, the crowd popped huge. But that's the art of that. Some say that's the art of wrestling matches, is trying to get the most out of the least to preserve your own body anyway. We've seen several matches recently that directly contradict that. Including this one, I might add. Yeah, so before we get completely off of Gargano and Ciampa, like, I thought the finish was stupid, too. Like,
Candice LeRae turns heel. Like, Gargano was already heel. She's like, oh, I'm going to kick him in the nuts. And then it turns out he's wearing a cup.
It's like two things on the nut shot. First of all, yeah, it hurts a lot when you get kicked in the nuts. But it doesn't hurt more than, like, a bunch of the super violent spots they were doing. It wouldn't incapacitate you anymore to get pinned for that. Secondly, that's not how a cup works. And everybody that's ever worn a cup knows it does not render your testicles invulnerable. If somebody kicks you in the nuts when you're wearing a cup, then they're just kicking you with the cup. That's all.
I will say on the cup thing, the one good thing that came out of that is Gargano and LeRae did a promo from their home on this week's NXT where they're like eating dinner and they have the cup in a glass case on the dinner table.
Good. Well, that's the other thing. Nobody involved in this sucks. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of Gargano, but I get it. He's a very good performer. I like Tommaso Ciampa a lot. Turning Candice LeRae heel is an interesting experiment. She's very good. But this match, just all the ingredients, it's like, you took a big bowl of ice cream and then you poured a bunch of ketchup on it. And, like, it was bad. It was just bad.
Yeah.
I take it there's not a lot of cup wearing in wrestling, right? I imagine it kind of gets in the way.
A lot less than you'd think, yeah. What you want to wear compression shorts more than you want to wear, like, an athletic cup. Yeah.
I wore a cup when I was doing karate and we would do, like, sparring. And it was very uncomfortable. And it definitely reduced mobility. Though I was very glad that I had it on. And I know firsthand that, yes, getting kicked in the nuts even while wearing a cup does hurt. Because I had a fight with this little kid, or a match with this little kid. He was shorter than me. And we come up, we square off, and he walks right up and kicks me right in the nuts.
Yeah.
That was the whole thing. And he was disqualified, obviously, and they made him kneel in shame, but he still got kicked in the nuts. It sucked.
Like, it can protect your testicles as organs, but it doesn't make it not hurt. Yeah, go on, Evan.
Look, if it's self-defense, I mean, that is the best way. If you're actually trying to win a fight with somebody, that should be your opening move.
Right. If you can get to it, yeah.
Anything else about this match, Evan?
I got nothing else about this match.
Since I have now watched it twice.
I'm sorry I brought it up. I thought it would be interesting. You even when hating on it, you still made it sound interesting. That's the power of your love of wrestling.
That's fandom, man. That's fandom.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's over. They can both move on to other things, although they probably won't. They'll just continue to feud forever.
On the contrary, we were talking about how, AJ Styles really wasn't the right choice for the Boneyard match, like if that was the plan to begin with. People have been calling for this match for years, and I think it would work perfectly as a cinematic match given the limitations of the two guys. Undertaker and Sting.
Oh, yeah.
They should do like Boneyard style.
Sting, who's too old and injured to have a real hard-hitting wrestling match, could totally have like a Boneyard match style cinematic match where he doesn't actually have to punish his body. And by the nature of like his mystique and character, it'd be cool. He could bring a vulture maybe. Like, yeah, I'd dig it. I am looking forward to the spectacle that will be Money in the Bank, honestly, where all of the people in Money in the Bank, once again, it's not just going to be a match in a ring with a ladder and a briefcase. It's the movie, like, pitch is basically they're going to start at the ground floor of the WWE office building and fight all the way up to the roof, which is where the ring and the ladder and the belt is going to be. And, like, that sounds pretty good. I haven't really been watching the show, but I'm going to watch that.
Yeah, I haven't been watching the show. Drew McIntyre's the champion now. I'm curious about, like, what would the crowd reactions be to what they're doing now? I think that having no crowd at this point is actually working to McIntyre's benefit because he's not all that interesting of a character. And I think the crowd would very quickly turn on him if there was a crowd. But since there is none, for this period of time, he can sort of build up this legacy for himself. He can maybe work on his character and develop it in some ways so that by the time the crowd does come back, he's ready for them.
I think to his benefit also is that when crowds come back, they're going to be really happy to see wrestling. And they're going to be really happy to see the new champion live.
By the way, I think the normal wrestling viewers agree with our assessment of the fact that the matches with no crowd just don't really work, because damn, our ratings in the toilet
Yes.
for Raw and SmackDown. I think
Just
AEW is
nobody's-
still going pretty
It
strong.
it
right?
dipped for a couple of weeks, but it bounced back.
Yeah, because they've been running a good show, even without
It
the
helps.
It helps to not suck if you want people to watch the thing that you make.
Exactly.
Make that thing be good.
You think more people in wrestling would get that, but they're so closed-minded.
It is. That's one of the hardest things about making entertainment, is that it's good things are good to watch but hard,
Yeah.
and then bad things are also hard to make, but then you don't want to watch them because they're not good.
That's a thing that I think people don't really appreciate much about media.
No.
Bad things are also very hard to make. George
Oh, yeah.
Carlin wrote in one of his books, and he was joking, but his point is valid. He says, when I see a movie now, I don't bother myself with whether the movie is any good. I'm just impressed by the fact that hundreds of people showed up to a lot every day, cutting bagels and building sets and memorizing lines and in the lights and the cameras and getting it all together, and then a whole other team of people edited it, and then they marketed it, and then I saw it. It would be selfish of me to take all of that and watch the movie and go, man, that sucked.
I mean, I think the
Yeah, right?
I think the difference is, though, once you set up all that machinery, if the reason why the thing you're producing is bad is just because it's like unoriginal and generic, and you can mass produce bad shit. Whereas good shit actually requires a lot of thought and effort to do it the one time.
Yeah, that's true. That's why there are 8 Police Academy movies and like 1 Citizen Kane. Like, would you go see Citizen Kane 2? Like, no.
I do wonder, like, they're going to reboot Police Academy eventually. There's going to be some terrible movie starring like
Andy Samberg.
Pete Davidson. Yeah, Pete Davidson and
Right.
Andy Samberg.
Yes.
It's coming. Like, I just want them. I would rather them get it out of the way so I can stop being afraid of it.
But I will say to Doc's point, I'm pretty sure Gargano and Ciampa, put their heart into this match.
Oh,
like they worked as hard as they could to
I
make
also
it.
like to point out that I realize our opinion is in the minority. People really liked this stuff.
Do they?
Yeah.
Did they?
Because they like these guys. I mean, I like these guys to some extent too, but like, I'm not going to pretend that I didn't watch this and just continuously say to myself, man, this is dumb. This is so dumb.
I only saw bad reviews, but I don't know.
Oh, there you go.
So this
Interesting.
this has been
Even the kid, there's a student of mine who he actually wants to be on the show. Maybe we'll have him on sometime.
Well, we'll see.
We'll see. But he's a big fan of these guys, especially Gargano, and even he didn't like it. So
this has been Contesting Wrestling. Minisode. If you enjoy what we do, you should check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/contestingwrestling.
Yep.
We make a whole extra episode per week for $5 a month. So that's an average of 4 episodes per month. And then if you don't want to do the full $5, we have a $1 tier where you get the main feed episodes a couple weeks in advance.
Before we completely wrap, I want to plug that I have been in quarantine streaming on Twitch every day. I've been playing mostly Super Mario Maker 2. It's been a lot of fun, usually late at night. Follow me at Doc Diamondfire on Twitch. Also, our cohort, who has taken a couple of episodes off just to recharge, Katie Vella. She has also been streaming on Twitch. She streams Pokemon. Her Twitch handle is Over Here Counting. And also, she was just a guest on the 20 Years of Nitro podcast. They wanted her on. And, that's very entertaining. You can find that in all major podcast outlets. They watch Sold Out 97, an infamous show, and one we're quite familiar with. So check that on out. And I just wanted to get those plugs in there before we wrapped up.
Alrighty. This has been Contesting Wrestling. Thank you. We love you.
Peace.
Yep.